As a follower of Jesus, I read the Gospels a lot. Yet there was always this frustration that I felt when there seemed to be a lot of material left out of the Gospel that I was reading at the moment, or if I knew that the other Gospels told the story a little differently or more completely.
A casual reading of the Gospels will reveal major differences between all four of them. Many stories found in some are missing from others. In each Gospel, the teachings of Jesus are told differently, and to fully understand what he is saying, you must go through the process of doing your own merging when you read them. So we did something that took us about 4 years. We translated the four Gospels from the original Greek language. Then we broke down each Gospel word by word. Now, none of the Gospels are exactly in chronological order, so we had to rearrange all the bits and pieces into a plausible chronology of the life of Jesus. This required us to spend a lot of time in the Holy Land, examining the landscape and plotting the walking path of Christ from one point to the next. We traveled along 2,000-year-old highways, often by car, but many places were only accessible on foot. Then we matched up every word and every phrase in all of the Gospels with their corresponding parallel word or phrases from other Gospels. This was done very carefully, and it was, to be honest, very difficult, because the different words used in different Gospels to tell the same story sometimes don't line up very well, but we think our finished product is fairly well polished.
Well, after all this was done, I removed all the content that's duplicated between two or more Gospels, leaving totally unique material. A person can now read through the entire merged Gospels and get the entire story of Jesus in chronological order without reading any duplicated words or phrases. The merged Gospels is translated very literally, and I smoothed out the text only enough to make it comprehensible to modern readers.
The merged Gospels is broken down into two main sections. One section is the parallel version, and this is where we do a literal translation of the four Gospels into four separate columns. Every time the Gospels quote the Old Testament, we give you the Old Testament version of the quote so that you can make comparisons. In the parallel version, the reader can see exactly how every verse from all the Gospels compare, and any scholar can examine our work to see if our translation is accurate, because we highlight all the Greek variants. Now there's one more column on each page of the parallel version, and that's called the merged column, and that column is always gray. In this column, we merge all four Gospels together into one composite column that brings together all of the material from the four Gospels. Now, the second section in the merged Gospels is called the Harmonized version, and this is where we put everything together into one long flowing story. It's the same text that's in the merged column on every page of the parallel version, but it's formatted in a way that looks and reads like a normal Bible.
I found that after I had merged the Gospels together, I understood the entire story of Jesus a lot more. I didn't have to jump back and forth between the Gospels to see what I missed, and I found that I could read the Gospels in less time because all the duplicated content was removed. There was something else that came to the surface when I merged the Gospels. That was that a lot of things that Jesus said and did became a lot clearer, and they made a lot more sense to me.
There are some parts of Jesus' sayings that are difficult to understand, but when we merge the Gospels together, his meaning is much clearer. And this is what we teach you, how to understand the message of Jesus better when you merge the Gospels.
And another thing that happens when you merge the Gospels is that many passages from one Gospel that seem to contradict a parallel passage from another Gospel ends up being totally resolved. In other words, when you merge the texts, what looks like a contradiction ends up not being a contradiction, and you understand how the two versions work together. Now, why is it justified to merge the Gospels? Well, to begin with, you've got to understand, I just don't give you the merged version. I give you all four Gospels, separated and merged, so you get both. But why is this justified in the first place?
In the first 200 years of the Church, the early Church Fathers never talked about the Gospels. They only wrote about the Gospel. This is because in the absence of written Gospels, There was only one story of Jesus. That was the gospel. Granted, some people knew a few pieces of this oral story, and others knew other pieces of the story. And when people started collecting the written stories of Jesus, they realized that Mark had one version of the gospel, and John had another version of the gospel, and Matthew and Luke had their versions as well.
And it wasn't until the end of the 2nd century that people started referring to these individual writings themselves as separate gospels. But even in reading the 4 gospels, we find that Mark only has part of the story, Luke has a part, and Matthew and John only have a part. And what I've done in putting them all together is that I'm telling you the same story that was told to the early church. People like the merged gospels because they can read through it from start to finish, and they can get everything there is to know about Jesus, what he said and what he did, and nothing is left out. Every word, every variation between the gospels, it's all there, and it's literally translated.
You can order the merged gospels either online or over the phone, or you can download it immediately in the form of a PDF ebook. We also have an audio edition of the merged gospels, which is available to you either on CD or downloadable MP3 files. To hear a sample of the merged gospels audiobook, check out the link on our website titled Audiobook. In fact, you can even replace your currently recorded version of the 4 gospels with the merged gospels audiobook. The reason is because it's a very literal translation from the Greek, and it gives you the complete story of Jesus with nothing taken out except the duplicated material. You can order any of these by going to our online store at mergedgospels.com.